Okay, so while I am talking to a bit of an intro, I'm going to keep admitting people. So if people keep sort of flashing up, just to let you know that I'm going to keep doing that as we go on. But just a few housekeeping stuff. So welcome everyone. My name's Lydia and I'm a youth work specialist at the National Youth Agency. Delighted to host this webinar today. But just to let you know, if you have any questions during this webinar, then please raise your hand. You can find that icon in the participants tab just at the bottom, and there's little icons that you can use. So yeah, please do raise your hand if you have a question, or if you don't want to ask it, then please type it into the chat and I can ask it at a certain point. And I can try and wave at Charlotte to say, someone's got a question. Please, yeah, please, I think Charlotte, you're okay with people asking whenever. I don't think there'll be like a certain point. So yeah, do ask your question whenever and I'll try and either unmute you or in the chat or yeah. So now I will pass over to Charlotte, I think. And I'll just keep admitting people, but I will pass over to Charlotte to start now, if that's okay.
Wonderful. Can everybody hear me? I guess I just need to see like thumbs and yes, yes, I can see you all. You can see me. It's amazing. So my name is Charlotte. I am the founder and director of KIP Education, and we go into schools and youth settings and deliver workshops on all different things. I started out as a detached youth worker and then a young people's drug worker before setting up KIP Education. And that has become bigger because that tiny little drug and alcohol education became something much bigger than that. We all know that PSHE is, even though it's one lesson, it's really a billion lessons, and trying to squeeze it into that one tiny little box is not the same. But when we look at it in relation to youth work, it's the same work that youth workers have been doing the whole time. In my opinion, we probably should have PSHE. Workers should be youth workers, and they should be in every school, and we would be seeing some really different things. So it's really nice to see all of you. If anyone has any questions already, like anything specifically that they want to talk about, that would be really awesome. Pete, is it still breaking up? Is it better now that it's me talking and not Lydia? I'm thinking that Pete's all right. Hopefully, he might be having I think Pete's breaking up himself, but fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to see my presentation. Hopefully, let me just close that. Can everyone see that? Yes, you can. Fantastic. Just going to move all of this out of the way, and then that way I can present it. Don't be jealous of my PowerPoint presentation skills. Just get in touch and I'll help you to have the exact same PowerPoint presentation skills. Okay, everyone can see everything? I know it's stunning, isn't it? Just pause. Okay, fantastic. So we're looking specifically at substance abuse and lockdown for young people, because we are seeing some really sort of different things happening. It's not the same. Life is not the same for so many reasons. So I just want to start off, and I do this with young people when we're having talks about drugs and alcohol. Now this is the first time and last time that I will say drugs and alcohol, and I would like you all to take that on board. And alcohol is a drug, and we just say drugs. We don't say drugs and alcohol. It's very similar. The issues, the issues aren't any different. So we're just going to say drugs. So I always put this at the beginning of anything that I'm talking about around drugs, so that young people understand that when we're giving out information, sometimes to give out the information, it has to be the positive side of it, because no one takes drugs for negative reasons. We take drugs for positive reasons, and sometimes when we're talking about them, that information comes across as that we are sort of promoting it, which we are not promoting it. So that's my first sort of start, is that KIP Education does not condone or promote the use of illegal drugs. KIP Education does promote the use of common sense, and we're going to talk a lot about common sense, because the idea is that we're going to try and get young people to tap into their own common sense, because it's so unlikely that you, lockdown or no lockdown, you wouldn't be there when a young person is making their decision to take drugs at all anyway. So they need to be sort of actively looking at their common sense. Drugs can be very dangerous. They can kill you. Using drugs when you're young can have a lasting negative impact on your cognitive and emotional well-being. The best way to avoid drug-related harm is to not use drugs, and no amount of planning and care can ensure that you will have either a safe or enjoyable experience when you take drugs. So you can plan all you want, you can know everything, you can do anything, but you can't guarantee that you're going to have a good time. And for those of you who have ever taken drugs, or I assume that most of you have tried alcohol, or you know people who've tried alcohol, it's a highly available drug, and it makes it very confusing when we're doing youth work, because the message around alcohol and tobacco is that it doesn't marry up with the information that we're trying to talk about with all the other drugs, the illegal drugs. Does anyone know like how many illegal drugs there are available at the moment? Just, do you want to have a guess number? Can I look at the chat? I'd love to see how to, here we go. Here's chat. I put your question there, Kate, and I know the answer as well, so I'll let you know. 3,500. It's more than that, Steve. Oh, it's nice to see you, Steve. I know Steve. More. Thousands. Okay, it's less than thousands, okay? It's actually just under 1,000, okay? So you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of drugs, and the reality is that most of the time when you're talking to young people, you can't go through every single drug and explain every single drug and go into great detail. So we need to be quite specific to see where the young person's at. And I'm really going to try and help you to work out how you're communicating with young people and how to maintain a rapport with them without losing them. Because I do believe there are ways of talking to young people where you can continue a conversation, and there are ways of talking to them where you will completely lose them, and they won't come back to talk to you either, which is a real shame. So I'm hoping that we can have what Oprah Winfrey would call aha moments, where the young person goes, aha, and then something really sinks in. So, and I'm hoping maybe that you can have some aha moments in this session as well. So that would be really interesting. So Kate, so she goes with the main effects of different substances. Yeah, okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so I love this piece of artwork by Guy Downs, and I think it really sort of depicts drugs in a really clear sort of way. You know, it's not really as black and white as you think. There's quite a lot to it, and you know, it's really hard. I guess it's hard as a teacher, and I would say it's probably less hard as a youth worker. I think as a youth worker, you really do get the chance to speak to a young person where they're at, and the constraints are slightly different, whereas within schools, there's a lot of red tape to jump through. So when we're talking about talking to young people around drugs, we need to sort of grasp that there are people who take drugs and are okay. There are people who take drugs and are not okay. And we're working with our young people and trying to ascertain the sort of situations that they are dealing with. So if you just think about the types of like I take I'm diagnosed with ADHD. I take ADHD medication every day. It really works for me, and for me it has been really life-changing, this medication, where I'm able to focus myself a bit better and I'm not interrupting people in the way that I was, or just some of my impulses have been controlled in a much more comfortable way. Now, there are people who are also diagnosed with ADHD whose my medication wouldn't work for them. And we also know that if I gave you my medication, well, one, it becomes an illegal drug, but the other is that it would have a completely different effect on you. I don't know if you know this, but if you give somebody with ADHD caffeine, it actually helps them focus. Whereas for somebody else, it might make them very jittery. So just like a show of hands, if you love caffeine, all functioning caffeine users. Now put your hands up if you don't like caffeine. It's just yuck for you. Yeah, Elaine's like, no, thank you. I don't like it. Yeah, so we're already seeing there's a grey area there. Yeah, you've got a grey area, which is this works for me, but it doesn't work for you. And how am I meant to explain that? Have you got your hands up, Lizzie, or are you just stroking your face? You know you're not allowed to stroke your face.
I thought I saw a hand up and it disappeared. So if you had your hand up then for a question, let's put it back up again. But it might have been for the caffeine thing, so I might have. Oh no.
Oh yeah, they were caffeine users.
I can see Linda. Do you have a question? I'm gonna try and unmute you.
No, I don't have a question. I'm just not a caffeine.
Oh no, that's fair enough. Cool.
Linda, tell us why. What's the effect that you get from caffeine?
I grew up not drinking caffeine. It's part of my religious thing. I do like the smell of it, but when I had tasted it, I didn't like it.
Yeah, it can be bitter. I understand that. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. And we also know like there's certain things, I don't know, some of you probably can't eat bread and some of you can't eat gluten or dairy, you know, like different things work for different people. And when we're talking drugs with young people in a youth work environment, we have the luxury of dealing with a young person from exactly where they are at, okay? And if I look at myself as a young person, say a 15-year-old, quite heavy cannabis user, I had quite a good knowledge of cannabis, and I wouldn't have wanted to hear the basics. I would have wanted only aha moments, okay? And that would have been the only way you got my attention. So it's really important that we sort of address where a young person is at. Okay, so addiction. So addiction, just by its nature, is an isolating thing. And that's the bit that sort of is worrying when we're looking at lockdown and we're looking at this sort of quarantine situation, because any time where our anxiety is heightened, then that can be a trigger for drug use. Tons of studies, and I mean, I could list them all. There's tons of studies that have shown that those who feel more socially isolated deal with increased mental health and therefore substance abuse issues. And that's quite a worrying thing, because some of the young people that you're working with, that might be happening for some of them already, and they've got no support. They haven't got their youth club or their youth worker to go and talk to. So are they going to talk to you? So that's what we're trying to sort of work out how we're going to do that. So it may also be that those young people had been using with friends and they're now using drugs on their own. And there's all sorts of things that go along with all of that. And some of that is they might be using more, so their tolerance might be getting more. They might not have access. It might be that they're actually not using and they're actually withdrawing right now. And for some young people, they may not even realize that their tolerance was that high in the first place for them to be withdrawing. So we need to work out how we can treat them from sort of far away, I guess. And I just put that little bit at the bottom about the chicken and egg. So like people turn to substances because they're lonely, and people are lonely because they're addicted to substances. So it's not just this concept of taking drugs to have a good time. I guess the nature of addiction is it's a thing that most people do on their own. The addiction side of it, okay? So we know that drug use, especially the recreational fun drug use, is usually with other people, and that can really sort of increase into something else. So if that's like something that's happening to your young people, or any young people that you're working with, I really would like you to put that in your question so that I can have a look at that. But I just very quickly, I just will answer Kate's question, which was how dealers are coping with lockdown. So I just saw a news article today about dealers using like food delivery drivers to deliver food and drugs, basically. So just for example, one of the things that I saw was a guy who was using a pizza delivery guy, and the police have pulled the pizza guy over, and the pizza weighed 11 kilos. Well, the pizza box weighed 11 kilos, and it had a load of cocaine in it. So that's one way, I guess, that drugs are being delivered. But we also know that drugs have been delivered to young people through the post for a long time now. I don't know if any of you have seen the social media stuff around the social media stuff that dealers. I mean, give it a try. If any of you like, go and like a few pictures of cannabis here and there, and see what happens in your direct messaging, because you will start to see drug dealers get in touch with you, because it's easy. If I was a drug dealer, I would rather go to the post office and post my drugs to you than stand in Sainsbury's car park and put myself at risk, especially now. I know there's been some surveys around young people about drug dealers and whether they're wearing masks or or whether they are wearing gloves and stuff. So it's amazing what people think. You've put, isn't ordering online traceable? Okay, so no, it's marginally traceable. So I'll sort of explain to you the two different ways that it works. So you've got the one way that it's working is that, let's just say you've got a dealer who's taking money via PayPal. So your PayPal transaction will just be friends and family. You're not putting for goods and services or anything. You're just putting friends and family, and it would just come in the post. And it would have to be that someone would have to go into that post, which is highly unlikely, because most dealers will be wrapping their drugs. If it's a smelly drug like cannabis, then they're going to be using those like sealing systems where you put it in plastic and then you can seal the top of it. I'm doing like actions, hoping you all understand, but there's like some sort of a plastic sealing system, like if you were trying to like vacuum pack your clothes or something like that. It's the same way, but you wouldn't be able to see it traceable online. Well, if you're doing it via WhatsApp and you're asking for something via WhatsApp, then you would be they would do it via PayPal. And then you've obviously got the way that it would work with the dark web, where you would pay for it with Bitcoins. I guess to a degree, if somebody looked at your post, someone opened your post, that then they would see that. One of the questions people always say is, well, I just put a different name on the parcel because I wouldn't want them to know that it's Charlotte who's ordered it. And people don't even do that, because you don't want to put, like, I don't know, Cilla Black on your parcel, because your postman's been delivering to you for however long they've been delivering to you. And they'll be like, who's Helen Smith? She doesn't live here. I don't know who Cilla Black is. This is Charlotte Gordon's house. This doesn't make sense. And so they would be doing that to to their own house. So, so do you know how this is impacting on young people who are being exploited? I've heard that trap houses are not being used in the same way, and that young people are going missing less. So I think part of that is definitely true, that young people are a bit more protected in this sort of environment. And you are completely right. So county lines can't work in the same way that it's been working before. But we're still, obviously, young people are still vulnerable. And I guess more of what we're looking at is the pressures that young people are under during lockdown, and how that's impacting them on their drug use. So let's just have a look. Okay, so the basics. And I think it's really important that if we have this sort of basic conversation with young people, then we're being really open and honest, and I guess we're leaving the conversation much more open that way. So not all drugs are bad. And I think you can probably all say that if you've ever had an experience on drugs, on any drug, I don't know what you may or may not have tried in your lifetime, you may have had a good time on that drug, and you may have very lovely nostalgic memories of being on that drug. But in the UK, the most commonly used drugs are controlled by age. Doesn't even make sense for me. I think the drug laws are so confusing, and especially when it comes to youth work, I find the drug laws really confusing, because the laws really are, we've got this sort of ABC system. A is the most dangerous and harmful, C is the least dangerous and harmful, yet tobacco and alcohol are not even on there. So I find that really confusing. We've got drugs that can be bought over the counter. Some are only prescription. So my prescription, as soon as I give you my prescription, I become a drug dealer, and my prescription becomes an illegal drug. And some drugs are illegal to make, buy, possess, or sell, but all drugs are dangerous if misused. And I think that's a really important message. Whatever you're taking, if you're misusing it, then it's dangerous. And if you think even about something like sugar, if we have too much sugar, it's got a huge impact. And for some of us, sugar is really impactful. So just for example, with me, with my ADHD, sugar is really not a good mix. If you've got any kind of mood disorder, so if any young people that you're working with have got any kind of mood disorders, sugar can have a really big impact on how you can feel and think. And I don't think people put enough sort of emphasis around that. Okay, so does drug education work? Do you think it works? Do you guys think it works? I'd love to. I'm just looking. Lots of no face. No, I've got no screens. Do you think it works? For those of you who do have like an image, because I can see you, do you think it works too? Like yes or no? Roisin's in the middle. Can I unmute you? Is that possible? Can I do that? Can I? Roisin?
Yeah.
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 Roisin, why are you in the middle? I'd love to know what you think.
The volume is breaking up.
Yeah. I think we need to mute everyone. So
Okay, apologies. That was my fault.
Roisin, unmute yourself. Don't worry.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
I think it depends on the young person, to be honest, and their experience, but also the approach of the youth worker. Because drug education, depending on who's receiving it, and then also who's giving that education, has different impacts.
Yeah, we all know those crappy teachers who are like, oh, I had a spliff when I was 14 and I'm all right. That's helpful. Not, but it makes you look cool though, doesn't it? So I think that's sort of how a lot of some workers really go with that. So yeah, I would really agree with that. And so Florence has put that she thinks that the wider structural factors that influence drugs uptake and distribution. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important when we look at drug education that we don't use these sort of old school methods that really, really don't work. So just say no doesn't work. I funnily enough, my own dad, if I said, like, I said to him, I'm a bit nervous about today, and he goes, oh, just try and relax. Well, that's great advice, Dad, but, you know, I'm actually trying to do that, you know? So I think just saying, do this, is going to be really, really unhelpful and quite wasteful. We also know that shock tactics, horror stories, like, not only do they not work, in some cases they actually glamorize the whole thing and make it more inviting. And that sounds so weird to like be someone with a developed brain, but they just don't understand. You know, sometimes when you're young, I don't know if any of you, like I'm from the Scarface generation, and I was just like, I want to be Michelle Pfeiffer. This is it. And I look back on it now. I actually wanted to be Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman as well. And I saw that film recently, and I just thought, oh God, poor Julia Roberts, you know, this prostitute was just like, had such a rough life, you know, and now she's like, it's so wrong. You'd never have this, half these films could never come out now, right? So we need to be really, really sort of careful in our delivery. And we really don't want it to be a big, long, laborious, boring lecture. Young people aren't interested in it. It doesn't work. And these three things that I've put here that don't work, they don't work, okay? So you can't do it, then it's gonna work. They don't work, okay? So, and I really wanna sort of push that across, that sort of concept of, let's just stop doing stuff that doesn't work. Let's not waste our time with stuff that doesn't work. And let's only do stuff that really has got like evidence base. We know it works. It has a much bigger impact on young people, but it really sort of maintains our connection with young people. And I'm really into this whole, I don't care if we have a 5-second conversation, if it means that you come back and have another 10 seconds or another 5 minutes here or another hour there or whatever it is. I just know that keeping that rapport open is really important. And I think we have a lot of power as youth workers to sort of make that happen. So someone said, I think it's impossible to know if education 100% works without a parallel universe. I think you could be right. But what we do know is that these three particular situations, evidence does show that they don't work, yeah? And also, you know, we've done this drug program, we've done the Just Say No drug program, people still take drugs, okay? So we know that. We also, we're looking at all different sort of stuff that's been done. I know they did this thing with young people where they took young people into prisons and they made them sit with prisoners, and this is what prison life's like. And there are lots of young people who walk away from those situations and think, well, my life's really rubbish and I don't really have any stability and I'm not happy where I am. And prison looks quite good. I've got like meals, I've got no real grown-ups. You know, this is actually not so bad. No one's really going to stress me about whether I'm doing my schoolwork or not, or like this is fairly reasonable. So yeah, it's sort of having that sort of impact, and that's the same goes with life stories as well. You know, people who come in and tell their life stories, that can be quite glamorous for some young people. I think that life stories tends to be much more impactful on young people who weren't going to take drugs in the first place. But anyway, okay, so we've got some other things that people are saying, and I completely agree with all the comments, funnily enough, about formal education, and the concept of sort of mixing up some of these things together and creating a really interesting session for young people. So maybe you do have a bit of the life story and you do have a bit of that, but you're coupling it with some other things that make it really interesting for a young person so that they can take the information that they want. Okay, so these are the things that we know works. So look, I've put just say no. That's just so clever, isn't it? Just a clever play on words, like no, you know, no. Have I got your attention? Just checking. Good. Okay. So we need to make sure that our information is accurate, and that, believe it or not, that is actually not as easy as you think, because drug information changes. Look at what we're dealing with this COVID-19. I mean, for every bit of information that you find, you can find another bit of information that says the complete opposite. I've got people telling me they're going to be going back to school in the middle of June. I've got people saying there's going to be a second wave and you're not going to go back to school until 2021. Well, we don't know, right? So we really need to make sure that our information is accurate. And if you don't know the answer, don't pretend to a young person that you do know the answer. Go out and find the answers. Maybe even go and find the answers with a young person. So there's having the right information. I'm going to show you later on where you can go and get accurate information. And I'm also going to, because I do believe, whilst we are going to talk about law and we are identifying drugs and signs and symptoms and all of that stuff, having the skills is sort of what I want to try and give you guys, and what I think is most useful whilst your young people are stuck and you're not able to interact with them in the same ways. So interactive and participative, so not lecturing, so you get a chance to say your opinion. I'll never forget, I was asked in my RE lesson, because that's where you did drug education, in religious education. That's how, doesn't make any sense, right? Doesn't make any sense. But the reason where, so we did a debate and I was the pro-cannabis debate, and I learned so much in that time about cannabis. And it wasn't just about what the effects of cannabis was. I learned about that the first pair of Levi's were made out of cannabis, that you can make incredible rope out of cannabis, all these fantastic, fascinating things, which, you know, just gave me some really good information, as well as like hearing all the other side of it. And I think it's really important to look at social norms. And social norms is, I guess it's looking at what young people are doing and what they're not doing. Media, social media can sort of make us think that everybody is doing something that really they're not. And I know there was a sort of period of time where we thought that every young person who was in any sort of relationship was sending nude pictures. But when we started to really look at it, the numbers aren't as high as we think. It's the same, you know, all young people aren't taking drugs. I think as youth workers, we're in that sort of, in that bubble with working with vulnerable young people, where we feel like everyone's doing something, but actually that isn't always the case. So like one way you might want to look at that is, you know, how many young people aren't smoking, for example. You have a huge number in comparison to how many people are smoking. But if we look at it like that, it's much more attractive, and it's a much more positive way of delivering a message. So I'm just looking, I just want to have a quick look. Wish there was a network of youth workers who had lived experience of drug addiction that could be brought in for sessions. That there are loads of workers who are delivering life stories. KIP Education, we have loads of recovering addicts who talk about their stories, and even them, we have to train them to talk about drugs, not just within their life stories. They have to be able to speak about drugs on the other side as well. So yeah, the youth work side of it. But in real truth, and I've worked with drug users for a really long time, I've very rarely had to discuss my own personal drug use. And I don't believe that whether you've had experience is necessarily relevant to how you deliver good and effective youth work. So whilst it is important, whilst I get it that if you've had the experience, you can get it, but I think that for a lot of you, you can understand the concept of addiction and the concept of, I guess, thanks, Kate. She totally agrees with me. I like to hear that. But yeah, it's the concept of having knowledge, you know. So I always use the old counsellor's technique, which is, I wonder why it's so important for you to know whether I take drugs or not, or flip it back round and see what they say. I mean, it's not really that relevant. So Steve just put 2015 data indicates that 31% of adults have tried drugs. That's not a lot, is it? So if we flip that round, I don't know what, I'm not very good at maths, so something like 60-something% have never taken drugs. That's fascinating. I'm sure most people would never even think about that. I think it's quite hard to sort of establish as well. We also know there's a huge stigma attached to drug use, huge stigma. And the stigma is, it is wrong, okay? It is wrong to take drugs, but it's okay if you're like quite wealthy and you're just doing coke, or you're, you're just sitting at home and you occasionally have a joint, or it's 7:30 and you've had a hard day and it's just wine, or so. The stigma is so confusing, but because of the stigma and the stigma attached to drug use, particularly when we look at cannabis use, cannabis users don't want to associate themselves with this sort of drug user model because they don't see themselves as drug users. I mean, some of the things that I've sort of heard people say to me about cannabis is it's grown in the ground, so it's really like a herb, you know. Well, I've seen the Hunger Games, I've seen loads of things. You can't just eat stuff in the ground, and you need to be quite careful, and it might have an impact on you, some of that stuff in the ground, you know. I don't know if any of you know that inside an apricot pit, for example, is arsenic. Don't eat the inside of an apricot pit. But also it's to do with you, okay? And we're going to sort of look at why it's different for you or me on different days, how we take drugs. So what's this? One tactic I use for the have you used drugs question is by asking if they would ask a doctor if they have had that condition. Oh yeah, it's a really good question. I like that. Flip it. It's a great way of flipping it. Yeah, it's okay if you're a Tory candidate suddenly being honest. Yeah, David. It's I find that all very interesting, you see. So I find it quite interesting for every sort of young person who's like sitting in court being done for cannabis, there's some like other young person, same age, who's like sitting in like, I don't know, Eton somewhere, and he's having a joint as well, and no one's having a go at him, you know. It's and as youth workers, we really need to be that sort of honest and open. I have no issue in schools, in any environment, youth setting that I'm in, being really honest that the laws on drugs don't make sense. But looking at my health and my well-being, I really do still need to address what drugs are. And, you know, KIP Education stands for knowledge is power. And I really believe that with knowledge, I can make a better decision. So it's focused on skills. When I say skills, I mean life skills, and I mean giving young people the skills that they can use when you are not there. So if any of you have done a session on drugs or like consent or something like that, and most young people will be able to, they can tell you everything. I know you don't do this and you do that, and you don't say this and you don't say that, and they know it. But when it comes to be put it in practice, it all goes out of the window, okay? So that's what we're trying to work on with a young person. And I really believe as youth workers, we're sort of just that sort of step before CAMS, before psychotherapy, before all of those things. And we have a real chance to help young people make really good informed decisions so that maybe they don't need to go on to there, or, you know, and they don't have to, because quite a lot of the young people I'm working with, psychotherapy would never have worked for them anyway. But had someone got in a little bit earlier and like had a look at self-esteem, had a look at self-worth and, you know, whys and all of that stuff, I think that it would have been a really different story for some young people. Yeah, so someone's put so many people in affluent areas in London who use coke every week. and are in A&E for overdose, and they're never harassed by the police. I know, and it's terrible. It's really frightening. We know there's a real big thing with homeless people and drug users right now with this COVID-19, with them not being treated in the way that they should be being treated. As some of the things are really quite upsetting when we start to see how negative people treat drug users and how much shame is attached to drug use. And when there's shame attached, then we don't share anything. So if you're making me feel any kind of shame, it's highly unlikely I'm going to share any of my and if any of you, when you were young people, did stuff that your parents would have been ashamed of, so you just didn't tell them, and they had no idea. And maybe years later you were like, yeah, I stole your car and I was the one who did this and I did that. You know, maybe years later you'd say that. Maybe you'd never ever say that to them in the end, you know. So yeah, it's really interesting. So we want to build on the young person's knowledge. So we want to be working from where the young person is at, and we want to make sure that there's time for discussion and that they can explore sort of their own ideas. Okay, does anyone have any questions before I sort of pause? I'm finding this so fascinating what people are saying. Coke is the second most popular after cannabis. If you want to have a real sort of interest, you can. They did these sewage tests where they tested the water in different areas, and they can actually tell you the sort of drugs that are being used in different areas. Because obviously if you take a drug, when you go for a wee, where does your wee go? In the toilet, and that all goes into the sewage, and then we can find out who's taking what where. And yeah, you can actually find out that there's more MDMA use in certain areas, there's more cocaine use in certain areas. It's mad, isn't it, right? Okay, so let's move on. I don't want to forget this because I think it's really important. There are 3 billion people will take drugs across the world every day, and 80 to 90% of them will not experience a problem that requires them to go to a drug service. I just want you to sort of take that in for a second, because I think that's really useful information. And for those of you who nodded when I asked, have you ever taken a drug, and you're all sat there, possibly paying rent, possibly owning your own properties, all got jobs, all managed to make it through on the other side. And for the majority of young people that you're working with, that they won't experience any major problems at all. So we need to look at how we work with those young people and how we make things safer for them. And I didn't say safe, and I make sure I never say safe. And if I'm with a group of young people, I really like enunciate the so I'll like go safe because I really want you to understand that you are not safe, but we potentially can make you safe. Yeah, so by making sure, for example, that you have money somewhere to get you home, or you're with somebody who is going to look after you, that makes you safe. By using a condom when you have sex with people, that makes you safer. There is no evidence that says by giving information like that will encourage young people to go out and do anything. Giving people information just empowers them, and I guess gives them we're talking about risk assessment, aren't we? Like a basic risk assessment. So for those of you who are allergic to certain foods, you go and look on the label. It says it on the label, this is the allergies, and you go, oh right, I can't have that, I'm allergic to soy, so I'm not going to have that anymore. It's a basic harm reduction message, okay? And there are harm reduction messages all over the place. I just think we don't really sort of realize half of them. Okay, so some of the harm reduction messages, and I want you to be I really want you to understand harm reduction. I'm going to show you where are you all sort of overly taken aback by the skill of my PowerPoint presentation. If any of you need any help, just please come to me, because I love this sort of thing. So yeah, someone's just put about Global Drug Survey. Global Drug Survey, not only they give you good information around drugs, but you can do the drugsometer, so you can actually test. You can sort of check how much drugs you're taking, whether you're okay while you're taking them. So a harm reduction message, just for example, so sort of understanding the drug. So do your research, so know the effects. Some people even say that you should spend about 2 hours doing your research around drugs. For any of you who've looked at Vice channel, they've got some fantastic stuff. If you come on my drug training, I can show you some of the other stuff, like more specific stuff. But there are some fantastic videos that really show the what drug dealers are doing. I think that people who, for example, people who take cocaine and they think that this cocaine is being made in this like beautiful lab by some sort of creative scientist who's very worried about cleanliness, and he's making sure that the counters are all clean when he's cutting things up. It is just not like that. We need to see it in its true form, and Vice have done that in quite a lot of videos, so you can have a look at that. Someone said I've used similar approaches to self-harm. We're actually going to be doing a talk about self-harm. I'm very passionate. I was a young self-harmer myself, so and I would really say that self-harm and drugs and alcohol and binge eating and things like that, they're very heavily connected. I don't want to over say what I'm going to say then, but there's a lot going on that is similar, and a lot of it is to do with trying to like cancel out racing thoughts and sort of numb your mind for a bit. So for those of you who are able to practice like mindfulness or stuff like that, that's a really healthy way of trying to get rid of those racing thoughts. But for some young people, racing thoughts is really tough, and it can make you feel really, really bad. And sometimes you just want to not hear that negative voice, because those racing thoughts, when you have low self-esteem and low self-worth, those racing thoughts can be hideously cruel and painful. And for some reason, we take them on board, and we don't take other things on board. We just take those negatives. So that's sort of a little bit about that. But I guess when we're looking for how that's connected with drug use and young people's drug use, there are young people who are using drugs to switch off, and we know that. We see that happening a lot with cannabis. We see that happening with now with DMT as well, this sort of like heavy psychedelic thing. But equally, I just want to say, going back to that grey and black thing, the grey and black and white thing, that there are people who are taking cannabis and who are fine, and it's actually working for them, and they are taking this or they're taking that, and it is working for them. So going back to dealing with a young person from where they're at, it really is important that you can grasp that. So using trusted dealers, that's just a basic harm reduction. If you're going to go to a dealer and you don't know them, you're going to speak to some random dude in a club, it's much less likely that they care about you and that they're bothered about whether they're going to get your business again. I guess part of this, when we're looking at this, having drugs delivered to your house, and this sort of, if you're thinking about the concept like Amazon almost, where there's like a review, there is sort of basic harm reduction that is quite helpful there, because if my drugs are quality and you have a nice experience on them, you will write that in your review, and when the next person comes to buy drugs from me, they will look at my review and see that my drugs are of quality, and it serves me. It's a bit like an Uber driver cleaning up his cab, he wants you to get in his cab and he wants you to get more, so there are positives as well as sort of negatives. So setting limits on how much you use, I would really say that this is a really useful one to do with young people. And you don't necessarily need to get a young person to tell you what the limit they're planning on doing, but you could just get them to sort of think about that as a sort of concept. I think some young people, if you ask them outright, are you using more on your own than you used to be? That could actually be a really useful question. Whereas for some young people, that question could actually really kill the conversation. And you just don't know. Like, believe it or not, I actually use humour sometimes. And humour can be really effective when you're working with young people. But know your audience is all I can really say, is because I think sometimes humour can really, some people don't find it funny at all, you know, so sort of thinking about that. I just need to move the chat so that I can see that. Okay, so now this is huge, okay? Avoid using when you're depressed and anxious. And I think that's why sometimes when you take drugs, you don't have a good time. And sometimes you can take the exact same drug and have a great time. And a lot of that is to do with your mental health or where you're taking that drug. And we're going to have a look at that in a second. But yeah, I would really be sort of looking at that. And that can be also why when you're with other people and you're taking the same drug, that your experience isn't the same. You've probably all been in a pub somewhere where someone was crying next to you. And that's a lot to do with where their mental health was at that day. And for most of us, we can't see our mental health. It's just something that we sort of carry around in our sort of invisible mental health rucksack. I would love for the invisible rucksack to be visible, but it's really difficult. Kate, you can't hear me. Kate can't hear me, Lydia, but I don't know why. Can everyone else hear me? Yeah, everyone else can hear me, Lydia. Kate, so I don't know, but Kate, you might want to go out and come back in or something. That might work for you. I'm not going to do my technical stuff, but okay. Linda Greaves was talking about her nephew who died taking drugs when he was depressed and hung himself, and no one knew he was depressed. And you know, this is a real another thing. And we see a lot of stuff like that. And you know, if I go back to my own ADHD, that was the real thing that was causing a lot of my sadness and a lot of my mental health issues. But I hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD. I had been diagnosed with naughty rudeness, and I was too busy being embarrassed and ashamed of my naughty and rudeness. And and so instead I had to deal with all these other things. So it's really interesting when we look at young people who are going through what you're talking about, Linda, with hiding all of that. Another harm reduction message would be to eat properly. And I think this is a really good technique that you can use with young people, even in primary school age. You know, we're talking about like prevention and harm reduction. So with real young children, so like your primary school age, like how does food make you feel? Like how do you feel after you have that pizza for lunch? Anyone tired? Anyone feel a bit sluggish? Anyone feel rubbish? And my son, I've got a 10-year-old son, he said to me he's got a headache, and have you drunk any water today? And he goes, no, because I've drunk none. I said, well, there's water right there. You know, I can't make you drink it. I can come and like push your head down in it every, you know, whatever to stop your headache. But this is self-care, basic self-care, and it starts very, very young. So we practice self-care when we're young, and then we you know, we take that into later life. And that goes with looking at the label on a paracetamol box that has been heavily researched, and so we know the dose. Do you know the dose when you buy drugs from a drug dealer? No. Can you take it back if it doesn't work? No. Can you just go, oh, I felt a bit paranoid actually, so can I just swap that for can I have my money back? I didn't have a good experience. No, there's nothing. It doesn't say on it, don't operate heavy machinery, careful if you're pregnant. No advice, no information, nothing. You get more information if you go and buy 6 chicken nuggets than you would if you got drugs from a drug dealer, okay? So we really do need to be doing our research and knowing what we're taking. And like we do with everything else, why wouldn't we do that? So it's not so absurd. And for every young person that I've ever met, they have deleted their browser history before. So why not look up something important and then delete your browser history afterwards? I really couldn't care less. Like, look it up, find out about it. Look at someone else having a seizure and see whether you want to maybe have a seizure or not, you know? And these are really sort of basic levels, okay? So this is, I don't know if any of you have seen this before. I do this with young people, I do this with grown-ups, I do this in groups, I do this one-to-one. It's a great, this is about as close to maths as you're ever going to get from me. But 1 + 1 + 1, does it equal a good time or does it equal a bad time? Okay, and it's really important to sort of look at it. You know, if I don't know, if I let's use alcohol as an example, okay? Because I'm assuming that alcohol is a legal drug, and we don't have to worry too much about the purity of alcohol because it's regulated. It's a regulated drug. So the drug is regulated, so we don't have to check whether that drug is okay. But the mindset of the person, okay? So I've had a terrible day. I feel awful. Like, they haven't furloughed me. They've just told me, you're done. See you later. Go home. So now I've got no money. I've got no nothing. This is sounding a bit too close to home, isn't it? And I feel bad, you know? I've come home. My kids' trousers don't fit and I need to buy them new clothes and I'm stressed out and my house is a mess. And they're all screaming and shouting around me, and I open up the fridge and I've got wine in there, and am I going to have a good time on that wine? I'm maybe not going to have a good time on that wine, right? But I might come home on exactly the same day, on a different day, same fridge, same wine, open up the fridge, and I may say, it's my birthday, I'm having a great day, I just got a promotion, I've just got like fallen into some money or whatever, and that same wine could actually produce a good time, okay? So it's kind of giving young people this risk assessment, okay? And this is the same risk assessment that you do when someone says to you, do you want to drink, right? And we live in Britain, so there's no way that you have not been sort of peer pressured about alcohol, because it's the one drug, you know, if you go into a crack house, people don't peer pressure you to do crack because nobody wants to share with you. So alcohol is the one that we can guarantee people do want you to be drunk with me, you know. So the whole idea is let's get drunk, and you do this normal risk assessment. You know, am I working? What am I doing? What time is it? You know, it's 10 a.m. It's a bit early, but it's Friday. Look, if I said to you now, you'd be doing your risk assessment. Now, why can't we give young people that skill to do their own risk assessment? Because that's much more realistic. You know, I've got an exam tomorrow. I don't think I want to do it, but I will drink with you in 2 days after my exam. But I think if I drink today, it's going to be a stupid idea. I spent last night, I don't know, I spent all last night self-harming. I feel really bad today. I'm in a shame cycle. Drinking's probably not going to be so useful for me today. And it's looking at it in that sort of way, okay? But if the drug is an illegal drug, then we do have to look at the drug as a drug. We have to look at the purity of the drug, where you got that drug from. You know, there's certain things that can make that drug not pure. I just want to sort of tap into what I would normally say about the law when it comes to drugs, because I don't know about all of you, but a lot of people, for me, will say, a lot of young people I'm working with, particularly with cannabis, are but it's legal in Portugal, miss. It's legal in Canada, and it's legal here, there, and whatever. And, you know, whether I agree or I don't agree with the laws around drugs, the laws exist. And if you break the laws, there are consequences. So I would always just say to a young person, you know, if you get pulled over and you've got weed and you're smoking, you can't just go, I thought I was in Portugal. Sorry, like, you can't just say that. So we need to be a bit more sort of conscious of those things. What did it say? What if the use is to block things completely? So I wouldn't be looking at the behaviour, and I would definitely be looking beyond the behaviour. So if you're using drugs to block things, you're probably doing other things to block things as well. And I would be looking much more at how we tackle mental health, self-esteem, all of that stuff, because the drug use will change. You know, we see, let's look at young men who are offending, and they get a girlfriend and then they just stop offending. And it's not like this girl has got some sort of like magical powers and she knows whatever. It's that things have changed for that person. And when things change, your negative behaviors change. And equally, if you've got nothing to cope with, then you're not going to use your coping mechanisms because you're not coping with anything. And that's, I guess, the whole reason why we're sort of talking about today, because this whole sort of thing with lockdown has actually, I guess, has triggered for a lot of people these weird coping mechanisms that maybe are unhealthy. So I just want to quickly touch on harm reduction and judgment. So, you know, what I was saying before about stigma and stuff like that. So be really careful, because if your harm reduction is cloaked in any kind of judgment, it won't work, and it won't be effective. Sorry, it won't be effective at all. And I guess that's quite important. What can I do? Hang on one second. I'm just thinking that just for you to be aware that, you know, every single micro mannerism that you do that is negative towards a young person, they will pick up on that. And if a young person thinks that you are judging them, or has something, just some sort of core belief that they are being judged, and you make some sort of small body language movement that says that, they will see it. So just make sure that your body language matches up with your voice language, and you know, about being authentic and congruent in your delivery. So dealing with addiction whilst in lockdown. So I read this and I thought this was fantastic. We are physical distancing. We are not social distancing. Okay, and I think it's such a misinformation and so unhelpful to those of us who have real like mental health stuff going on, to think about that sort of idea that we are social distancing. We're not. We are physical distancing. We can be as sociable from a distance. So that means chatting to each other, talking to each other, drop-ins and all these different things. They're just got to be a bit different. And the one thing I know about youth workers is we're the most creative people. We can make up, we'll find our ways, you know. And I think we've got a great opportunity to connect with our young people. I mean, when was the last time you could guarantee that they would be there nearly all the time? Just sorry, I'm not busy. Oh, I'm not busy. I'm not busy. I'm not busy. Fantastic. Let's do some work around this, that, and the other. So making an extra effort to maintain those social bonds, trying to avoid watching too much news and interaction with all of that stuff. Social media can be a really positive outlet for lots of people. Believe it or not, that Instagram, YouTube is highly motivational if you're looking at the right things. So go and look for the right things, or help young people find the right things. Trying to create a new routine. I don't think we've got much choice, so let it be a positive one. Acknowledge and accept your down days. And I think that really is useful for all of us. I don't know, I mean, for those of you who are married or with partners, but if someone had said to you, your partner, you're going to have to be with them 24/7, do you still want to be with them? I mean, I know if someone had said to me, you're going to have kids and you're going to be with them 24/7, I think I would have said, yeah, I don't know if I want kids, actually. I think I'll just maybe look at yours, not mine. So acknowledging that it's tough. It's a really, really hard situation. You know, we're in no one could have accounted for this. There's no way that you could have said, I thought this was going to happen. I mean, for anybody, except that David Icke, he knew it was going to happen. He knows a lot. Don't look him up. Okay, stay active if you can. Try and stay active. try and maintain a regular diet. I don't know what, when we're looking at eating disorders and the young people that you're working with, I know the statistics from BEAT, the Eating Disorders charity, I know that their calls have gone up 30 to 40% since we've locked down. So I know that eating disorders are different. So I think people's diets are changing. Probably lots of you are eating more minstrels and Maltesers than you were before. So just trying to keep that. If you can, practice mindfulness and calming breathing techniques, develop a new skill. These are all like great ideas, you know, and whilst I say all of that, I would equally say it's really fine to do nothing. I think for some of us, they feel so pressurized with all of this. You know, I should be writing a book. I should be writing a film script right now, and just do nothing if you want to. I know when I was 15, all I wanted to do was nothing. You know, this was ideal, and in fact, I'm really enjoying parts of this sort of yeah, it's very slow pace and it's quite nice, and it's not going to be slow forever. So I think there is something to be said about enjoying all of that. So these are some, I want you to think more like harm reduction than anything. So I'm going to sort of keep that in my mind. So one is you've got Crew 2000, then Scotland, they've got some brilliant stuff around harm reduction. Global Drug Survey we talked about already. Forward, they're the same as Crew, got all that harm reduction information. Bristol Drug Project, the Club Drug Clinic, which is based in London, and the Mix, all of them giving really, really useful information about harm reduction, and if you're going to take a drug, like how to take it a bit more safely. Like, I'll just give you a really small, I think I'm just done with my presentation now. Let me just, that's me. And I'm going to, I can send out all of this to you guys as well if you want to get in touch with me. I'm really happy to share information. So I'm just going to stop sharing so you can see me. But yeah, I'm just going to say like a couple of harm reduction techniques that you might find useful. So one of them is, I don't know if you know this, like if you take MDMA and you drink alcohol as well, alcohol takes away some of the effect of the MDMA. So you actually would have a better experience on MDMA if you didn't drink alcohol at the same time. But not a lot of people know that. And you feel like that is, well, now I'm going to go out and take loads of MDMA. But that isn't the case. That's the type of information that you give to a young person who is already using MDMA and alcohol. That's not the type of information I give to an 11-year-old who's never ever taken a drug before. But it's when you're looking at a young person from where they're at and you're letting them lead the session or lead the chat, I think you get much better answers, and you can give out much better information. The same, you know, if you mix alcohol really with any drug, you heighten the danger massively, particularly things like cocaine and alcohol. It creates a whole new drug, something called cocathylene, and that's much more damaging to the body. But yeah, it's just sort of thinking of it a bit like that, you know, when we're trying to get young people to look at their cannabis use, but try and get them to look at it. How do you feel the next day? What is working when you're taking cannabis? What are you enjoying about it? And what are you not enjoying so much about it? You know, these sorts of things. I think for a lot of people in lockdown, they will, if their drug use has increased, then their tolerance has increased, and that's going to create all kinds of issues, because if their tolerance has increased, then it's all going to start costing them more, and the withdrawal is going to start. They're going to start to feel more withdrawal effects. So I'm kind of at the end. Well, not kind of. I am at the end. I'm just going to put our. We've got some. If you want to come on the training. In fact, if you want to come on the training and you were here, because I'm going to get a participation list, or you're watching this on the YouTube, as my father-in-law calls it, the YouTube. I can offer you, I'll give you a discount for those of you who want to come on the trainings that are coming up. We're doing some really much more intense stuff around drugs where you can get more information. There's lots of different trainings. Does anyone have any questions at all? It's quiet, Lydia, so I can't hear.
Do unmute yourself if you want to ask
Yeah.
a question, if you can do.
If you can unmute yourself, if you can't, tough. No, if you can't, you'll have to press whatever buttons there are. Yeah, Relief UK are doing a lockdown drug use survey. Thank you, Nicole, appreciated. There's quite a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff about like real like quite serious withdrawals. So if we're talking about like heroin withdrawal and stuff like that, and how to look after young people. I would also say to you, and I would say this with any young person who is really sort of struggling, that when we go into that isolation mode, and you may be doing it here and there yourselves right now because you're a bit stressed out or whatever, for whatever reason. So I always tell young people that when they're in that, the best thing to do is to go downstairs, talk to whoever's in the house, call a friend. Like, I mean, go like by all means, go and listen to your depressing playlist for a bit, but then go and be social. And it's really interesting when we talk about depressing playlists, because I don't know if any of you like are on like subscribing music systems, but like if you go onto Spotify and you look up depressing, do you know how many playlists there are? Like, people love to be more depressed when they're depressed. So, you know, we have to allow, you know, when you pick that really sad movie, you're just up for it. You're up for that like misery for a bit, yeah? So like, you can't turn around to young people and say, yeah, just don't be depressed, you know, just get out there and chat and then. So yeah, I get it. I really, really get it. I do it too. You know, even if you just go downstairs and talk to someone for 5 minutes, or you call a friend for 2 minutes, or you send a message, you know, whatever it is. There's tons of all the AA stuff. So Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cannabis Anonymous, Eating Disorders Anonymous, Binge Eaters Anonymous. I mean, there's an anonymous for everything. There's an anonymous for anonymous. They're all doing their meetings online. And for some people, an online meeting actually might be more enjoyable for them than a face-to-face meeting, because it's yeah, you don't even have to talk. You can keep yourself to yourself. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions before we finish? No questions from me. Thanks, Kate. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, I hope that we can all sort of work together. Thanks, Steve. I really hope that we can all sort of work together in the future. As far as like what we do as KIP Education, it's not just drugs. We do stuff around all different things around health and well-being. So whilst I obviously want you to book us, equally, I'm really happy to share resources. So, you know, if you're looking for a video about abortion or, I don't know, domestic violence, I've probably got one already. So feel free to message me, charlotte@kipeducation.com. I'm really, really happy to share resources from now until forever, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was such a good webinar. I've written loads of notes as well, which I need to decipher because my handwriting is really shocking. But yeah, thank you so much. Just to say that I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar, and we will be doing more webinars going forward as well on different topics during lockdown. And if anyone has any feedback for us, then please do send it through to the MYA address. And including topics that you might want to hear about as well. We've got the Youth Work Support website up, and that will still be going on onwards for, I don't know, the foreseeable future. I don't really know if we'll ever take it down. But yeah, if anyone has any comments now on the potential webinars that they would like in the future, then please put it in the chat or shout out. And if not, I will end the call soon, really. So if anyone has any last requests, you'll find this on YouTube. So if any colleagues you think might be interested in watching this back, then you'll find the link soon, and we'll put it on the Youth Work Support website. But thank you so much, Charlotte. It was so good.
Charlotte, I've got a quick question.
Oh,
go
good
for
question.
it. Hi, Steve.
Yeah. Hiya. So I've been in touch with a few of my regular schools, just checking in with regards their online lessons, the regular curriculum, which obviously they're focusing on, just to double check, unfortunately, that PSHE has taken a step to the side which they've confirmed. I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, that the focus is on the core academic subjects, and PSHE has taken a step into the abyss.
It's really, really hard because I don't, but I know that health and well-being is still there. And I think there's a lot to be said about having health and well-being still being there, and tapping into health and well-being. But yeah, the rest of it has sort of dissipated, which is a real shame. I particularly worry about certain groups of young people, like young people who are not doing anything. Like, I don't know if I'm doing my GCSEs or not, so I may as well just smoke weed all day, because who cares? And my parents can't really harass me because I've got no work to do. No one's giving me any work. So what's the thing? So I guess I think as youth workers, we want to be looking at, I think if you know your young person well enough, you can directly ask them, like, has their drug use changed? You know, are you drink? You know, because I ask my friends, like, has your eating changed, or has your drinking changed? Like, lots of people. I mean, I'm watching, like, I've got a friend, I know somebody who's like, they're drinking alcohol, and all of a sudden they've got a TikTok account. Like, dude, how have you got a TikTok account? What is, you know, creativity rolls in many different ways. So I don't know. I think there's like that people are doing different things, and I think their behaviours are definitely changing. But I think it's hard enough for parents to teach the subjects that they're being asked to teach. To ask them to teach this as well, I think is I know personally as a parent, you know, like, I might know how to add up my shopping list, but how I explain that to you is quite another thing. You know, I'm not a maths teacher, and I think asking parents to do all of that is really tough. I am putting on some parents sort of webinars, like how to talk to our young people about sex and drugs and things like that. But you know, the reality is that they may not always talk to their parents, particularly about these kinds of things. That's the worrying thing.
And that's funny. The final thing you said there was teaching at a school in Devon, and I did a parents forum in the evening, and it was a bit like question time. You had some parents that were horrified at some of the harm reduction messages of credible drug education.
It's crazy, honestly. They don't want you talking about porn, drugs, nothing. You know,
yeah.
it's
But the thing was, I actually had a few parents that say that following sessions with their kids earlier on in the day, that when they returned home, the first thing that they said was that we've had somebody come in talking to us about drugs today, and it instigated the very first conversation between the child and the mum or dad, based on my lessons and sort of delivery style, which was very overwhelming, because that's the whole point of doing it.
Yeah, I think it's quite hard as well, Steve, when you're talking about homeschooling, and it's how people are homeschooling as well. Like, my kids' school is no, we just get given like bits of paper, like, you know, Google Drive, whatever, and here's the work. Whereas you've got schools that have got the like what I'm doing with you. The teacher is teaching. So I think that teaching about drugs when you're not equipped and you don't know what you're talking about is potentially kind of dangerous as well. So I would be, I'm not surprised that schools are not making it a priority. They're panicking, you know. So yeah. Thanks.
Yeah,
Steve.
challenging times.
Totally.
Thank you, though. Totally. Thank you. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Steve. Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Faye, as well. I really appreciate it. I hope that you can use the information and take it to your young people. Yeah, and ask those questions, and don't be afraid of disclosures and stuff like that. You know, we can work with disclosures. Disclosures don't mean having to go straight to a drug service or straight to here, there, and whatever. You know, it's just spaces for more chat, and that's sort of how I'm always thinking about it.